Now that we understand the object prototype, we can even more deeply understand what we mean by everything in JavaScript is an object or a primitive. Because everything in JavaScript that isn't a primitive, a number, string, Boolean, etc., functions, arrays, basic objects, they all have a prototype, except for one thing, the base object in JavaScript. All right, let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and create three things. I'll create an object. I'll create a function. That'll just be empty. And I'll create an array, also empty. An empty object, an empty function, an empty array. You can go ahead and do this yourself if you like. But we're only going to use these to explain how everything has a prototype. So if I go and run this, there's no errors. I now have access to A, B, and C. They're in memory here, running in the browser. So in my console, I can go A, which is an object, dot, underscore, underscore, proto. This works in the latest version of Google Chrome. And let's see what I have. I have the base object in JavaScript. The base object is just called object. It's the very bottom of the prototype chain always. Everything eventually leads to the base object. And these objects have properties and methods on them. So if I go look at the base object, dot, let's see what we have. See, I have some properties and methods like toString. All objects get access to .toString because that's the bottom of the prototype chain. All right, let's take a look at something else. Let's try a function. B is a function. So if I do .prototype, we'll see that there's this empty function object. That's the prototype of all functions. Any function you create in JavaScript will automatically have this proto. So what is it? Well, on it we have some familiar properties and methods. Remember apply? Do you remember bind? Do you remember call? Those methods? Remember how we said all functions get access to those methods? This is why. All functions in JavaScript are automatically have their proto property, their prototype set to this built-in object that has these methods on it. Apply, bind, call, and some other things. So I have access to these methods because it's on the prototype of the function object. So when I call .apply, it looks for it on my function, doesn't find it, and goes to the prototype, which happens to be set to an automatic built-in JavaScript object that does all of that work. Make sense? Same for the array. C was the array. I'll go look at its prototype. That's a little funkier. Some kind of empty array. But if I do a dot, I'll see it has a whole bunch of useful functionality, like index of, length. We've used that already. We've also used push. So all arrays in JavaScript, for example, I can do .push. Because any array that I create, the JavaScript engine automatically sets its prototype to this built-in JavaScript object that has the push method on it. So I can just call myArray.push, and the JavaScript engine searches the prototype chain, doesn't find push on my array, finds it on the prototype. That's why it's automatically available to you, because the JavaScript engine just set the prototype for you. Make sense? All arrays have a prototype pointing to an object with these methods. All functions have a prototype pointing to an object with those function methods. Now here's the fun thing. What's the prototype of the prototype? Object. Remember, that's the bottom of the prototype chain always. Eventually, you get down to the bottom. An object doesn't have a prototype. It's the base. Same thing with a function. A function's prototype is that base prototype object, and its prototype is object. And if I create my own simple object, its prototype is object. That built-in core object, that's the bottom of the prototype chain. So that's how you get access to some of those methods and properties that we've seen and others. Understanding that helps us understand what's happening under the hood, and that helps us understand JavaScript better. Let's move on.